Inventors you want to know. Hi, my name is Deborah Kimberling, and I am an aerospace engineer. I have worked in the submersibles here in San Diego. I have been able to do my own testing as a certified Navy civilian diver. I actually got to wear the hard hat on this dive suit as part of my training. I have worked on the Atlas Centaur rocket that you can see in this image here. Here we see it attached to the structural launch pad, and you can see that it is getting ready to take off. And at the very top of the rocket is the payload. And within the payload, we would put satellites. These could be communication satellites that you commonly have for circling the Earth's orbit so that we can communicate with different countries and different time zones and everything else that we need to advance that part of it. And at the bottom, it would be the rocket thrusters of where we would store the fuel in between to make sure it has enough fuel to get to the proper launch orbit. And then once it got into orbit, the payload would open and deposit the satellite. I've also worked at Solar Turbines on engines. These were medium-sized engines that might fit in the basement of a hotel. The small engines would be the ones that fit within cars or in your airplanes, but these were medium-sized engines. They're a little bit larger, and we would hook them up to generators so that they could fit, again, either at the basement of the hotel or a hospital, so that when the power went out, you would have critical life-saving emergency support for your patients. I have a master's degree in aerospace engineering. People ask if it's a difficult degree, and I want to say it's really no more difficult than being a physician. So you do have to study slightly different subjects, but it's a very rewarding career. In this presentation, I'd like you to think about some of the inventors that you've run across through your years, either in your classroom subjects or someone that you've discovered along the way. And as you think about who those inventors are, just to talk briefly a little bit about the differences between a scientist and an engineer. So a scientist is constantly looking at the world around us, and they're defining what they see, and they're turning them into scientific principles. An engineer will then take those scientific principles and turn them into reality, something to make the world a little bit of a better place, either safer, healthier, or to make life a little more fun to live in. Now, anyone can be an inventor. You don't have to be an engineer or a scientist. But I thought I would share some of my favorite inventors with you. And my very first, my favorite actually inventor is Shuri from the Black Panther. Now, I absolutely adore Shuri because she invented so many important things to protect the city in which she lived, from the safety shields so that nobody could enter the city. She created the Black Panther suit. She created some weapons and stun guns and ways to transport people to different time zones. And so it is very important to have creative people that can make the world a little better place. So thank you, Cherie. But of course, engineers have been inventing things for many a year, and one of the earliest known engineers within the United States is actually George Washington. He actually had some land surveying skills and helped institute some of the first engineering schools, the military schools, known as West Point, and that is still in existence today. He also created many inventions along the way, and he did them for cameras and lamps and a bunch of different types of food processing. And I know that he worked on some of the early cameras. Now, these are not the little phones that we use today, but they were huge cameras, and you couldn't automatically focus. You had to manually turn the lens so that you could focus it. And he came up with some of the optics optimization focusing systems so that you could focus a little bit easier. And he is also known for having created or invented instant coffee from the different processes that it would take to create the dried crystals that make up that instant coffee. And those were used throughout the army, and they would frequently thank George by calling it Cup of George. So thank you, George Washington. Now, George Gorey was a physician, and he created the very first refrigeration unit. He wanted to make the hospital rooms cooler to help prevent some of the tropical diseases and make the patients a little more comfortable in the hospital rooms. And so this machine was very useful. In fact, I'm very grateful that we have refrigeration today as well. So thank you, George Gorey. Now, Stephanie Kwolek is another one of my favorite inventors. She was a chemist, and she worked on different types of fabrics and materials and synthetics, from polymers to nylons, and one of those synthetic polymers happened to be so sticky and gooey it wouldn't go through the machinery that they were using to weave their fabrics. And she said, I want to study this material further. And when they were able to process the materials, they discovered it was 5 times stronger than that of steel, and it was extremely flame resistant. So they were able to weave this into fabrics and materials and ropes and cables, and invented some of the very first bulletproof clothing that you'll see the police and the army and people wear, but it's also there to reinforce the plastics. You'll see it in the helmets that you wear. It could be on the aircraft panel or in bicycle parts to make them more lightweight and durable. And one of the really common uses is in the tires. So they used to have steel reinforced tires, but now they're reinforced with the Kevlar. So thank you, Stephanie Kwolek. Uh, Maria Telkes. She was actually known as the Sun Queen for all of the inventions that she had around solar energy. So she created the very first solar power oven. You could see her in the newspapers there with her aluminum foiled box, doing a cooking demonstration of how you could focus the light's ray into the center of the box to heat up the pot of whatever it is that you were cooking. And she also created the first solar-powered house. And she was also out there saving lives for a miniature desalination unit. If you were on a vessel out in the ocean and something happened to your vessel and you needed to get onto the lifeboats, and if you needed to be on those lifeboats for any length of time, she created these miniature desalination units that could heat up, remove the water, remove the salt from the water so that you could have drinking water. So thank you, Maria Telkes. Another very important inventor is Julia Morgan. Now Julia was a civil engineer and an architect, and she became famous in 1906. She had a few buildings up, and she had invented a steel reinforced concrete that was decorative, aesthetic, that was used in buildings. You can see some of those columns here. And she became famous when her buildings survived the devastating earthquake from 1906 in San Francisco. 80% of the city collapsed. They had fires that were lasting for longer than a week. They had bridges fall down, and a lot of people lost their lives. So her claim to fame as having been able to stand huge earthquakes, and she ended up designing some really famous buildings, including the Hearst Castle. So if you ever go up to the Hearst Castle and you see her buildings, make sure to thank Julia Morgan for her designs and creativity. Because I was in the rocket aerospace industry, I wanted to introduce some of the rocket exploration, space exploration inventions along the way. And one of those inventors was Yvonne Brill. She was a jet propulsion engineer, and she actually invented a new type of rocket engine that was able to build to use an extremely efficient rocket fuel. And this is super important when it comes to spacecraft because the less fuel that you have to use, the more weight that you can put into the payload, into the satellites, and to the equipment that you're trying to put into space, into orbit. And so the more you can put up there, the more companies wanted your equipment versus the competitors. And so Yvonne Brill, thank you for making space exploration a little easier. Thank you, a little more efficient. The very first rockets that went into space did not have humans aboard it. Obviously, you needed to test the capabilities of the rockets to make sure it was safe for people to go on board. And one of those early tests that were done was to even determine if a living being could survive Earth's atmosphere. And the thrust and the gravity, the gravitational pull for having been in space and coming back and to land on Earth. And so Laurel van der Waal did some of the very first animal tests. She was actually able to successfully put a mouse into orbit and to have it come down and land safely. And so she proved that indeed you could have life in and on our rockets. And so shortly after that, so thank you, Laurel van der Waal, for your inventions and for your efforts. And shortly after that, we attempted our very first manned space flight crew, the very first astronauts that went into orbit. They circled they went into orbit, they circled the Earth, and they came back down onto Earth. And you're just going, well, what is important there? Well, it's super important that you get your calculations and your trajectories of how that rocket is going to get into orbit to understand the gravitational pulls, whether it's going to slow down, speed up, because when it goes into orbit, that's one thing, but when it comes down to land, you want to make sure that it lands in the ocean and you want to know approximately when so you can go there and you could pick up the astronauts that you sent into space. So Katherine Johnson, who is famous, she was profiled in the movie Hidden Figures, in case you haven't seen that. It's a really good movie. And so we want to thank our mathematicians out there for having helped make the calculations safer for us to send astronauts into space. And of course, we cannot talk about inventors if we do not include Ellen Ochoa. Ellen Ochoa was an electrical engineer, and she actually grew up here in San Diego. She lived in La Mesa. She went to Grossmont High School and to SDSU. But she invented some optical recognition systems because she had a passion where she wanted to help the computers see what environments they were getting into for autonomous or remote operation. And so she invented some methods for detecting patterns and textures in materials that were used for detecting flaws in metals from cross sections to see what was there and to detect textures and photographs. So thank you, Ellen Ochoa. And of course, one of my last inventors, I wanted to take us back to the camera since we started with George Washington's first early camera inventions. George Caruthers here, he developed one of the first moon-based observatories, and in it, he put in the very first camera to capture ultraviolet lights. Now, ultraviolet lights are some of those higher frequencies that the human eye can't quite see, but they're the ones that cause the sunburns. They're the ones that, um, if we're not careful, we can get cancer. But the ultraviolet lights are also used to help disinfect surfaces, to remove bacteria and germs. And so, George Caruthers, thank you for your inventions. If you liked running meeting some of these inventors, we have about 70 different profiles on the Legends page for the San Diego Engineers.org Legends. You may go there at any time, and if you have recommendations, we'd love to hear who those people are. And one way that you can do that is by entering the San Diego Engineers.org art contest. And so in this art contest that ends on April 30th, you can draw an invention. It could be anything to make the world or your life or the world around you just a little slightly better place. Or it could be simply drawing a role model of either a scientist, engineer, or somebody in technology. It could be someone that you think we need to add to the Legends page. That would be fine as well. You can enter electronically through the website one by one. You can scan the QR code, or you can just go to the STEM page and see the art contest. And of course, if you might want to talk to your teacher, if you want her to collect all of your artwork, we can do it that way too. We would need your name, your grade, school, your teacher, because the teachers can be entered in to win prize money. And of course, we'll have some prizes for the winners of the art contest as well. And for a little more excitement to end the day, we just missed the engineering day at the mall event, but we do have the rocket bottle launch that's going to be on May 31st at Gompers Community Park. This is hosted by the Society of Mechanical Engineers. You do need to register for this, and you can get to this to the San Diego Engineers.org STEM page, or you can scan the QR code, and by registering, they can calculate how many bottles that they're going to need for the rocket launch. So hopefully I'll see you at one of these events soon. Thank you, and happy inventing.